nobody could tame the Alpha King's beast. Then the Wolfless Omega did something shocking. The kingdom of Eldrath was a land of shadows and secrets, where the forests whispered ancient tales and the mountains hid creatures no ordinary human could imagine. Among all the legends, none was more feared than the Alpha King, Rhaegar. He ruled the northern lands with an iron will, a presence so commanding that even the strongest warriors bowed before him. His fury was legendary, and his wolf form, an immense dark beast with eyes like molten gold, was said to be unstoppable. Many had tried to confront him. None had survived. Villagers told stories by firelight of the nights when the Alpha roamed alone, how he could crush a man with a single strike, how his roar could echo through the valleys, shaking the earth itself. Mothers whispered warnings to their children, "Do not go near the forests, for the Alpha King's beast knows no mercy." And yet, in all of Eldrath, one girl would come to challenge the impossible. Lyanna lived on the edge of the northern forests in a small village that most of the kingdom overlooked. Unlike others, she carried no wolf blood, no special gifts tied to the pack hierarchy. She was human, or nearly so, a wolfless Omega, quiet and unassuming. Yet her presence had a strange calmness that even the wild animals seemed to notice. She moved through life unnoticed, tending to her small home and the village gardens. Yet there was a strength in her that few understood. She carried herself with quiet defiance, as though the world's dangers could never shake her. One late afternoon, a chill wind swept through the village. Leaves twisted in spirals, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Lyanna paused her work by the well and looked toward the tree line. There, between the shadows, moved a figure that the villagers had only whispered about in fear. Tall, broad, with dark hair and eyes that burned like gold, Rhaegar. Even in human form, his presence was enough to make the strongest hearts falter. Villagers scattered, locking their doors, hiding in fear. But Lyanna stood still, her gaze meeting his. She felt no terror, only curiosity. The stories of the Alpha King's cruelty were many, yet here he was, walking into her world. And for reasons she could not explain, she did not look away. Rhaegar's eyes narrowed. Most who saw him either screamed or bowed, begging for mercy. This girl, this fragile, wolfless girl, did neither. Her gaze held him. There was no fear, no pleading, only calm and quiet strength. His wolf instincts stirred, sensing something strange, something new. He tilted his head, studying her.
"You are not afraid," he said, his voice low and commanding. It rolled through the village like distant thunder.
"I have no reason to fear a shadow," Lyanna replied softly yet firmly. Her voice had a clarity that made him pause. No one had spoken to him this way in decades, if ever. The Alpha King felt something unfamiliar, curiosity, perhaps. A distant howl cut through the evening. It was Rhaegar's beast form calling to the night, and yet, when he looked at Lyanna, there was hesitation. He had lived centuries ruled by the beast within him, by a curse that no one could break. And yet, this girl stood before him, untouched by the tales of terror, untouched by his presence. That night, Lyanna could not sleep. She felt a pull in the woods, a strange energy that seemed to call her name. In the quiet of her room, she thought of the Alpha King and the golden eyes that had pierced her so calmly. There was fear, yes, but it was buried under something else, curiosity, and an unshakable feeling that her life was about to change. Meanwhile, Rhaegar roamed the forest under the light of the full moon. His wolf form stretched and rippled with raw power, black fur blending into the shadows. Usually he would have hunted with single-minded fury, tearing through anything that moved. But tonight, he paused. The girl, the calm human who had dared to meet his gaze, was on his mind. For the first time in centuries, his instincts did not demand her destruction. He circled the village silently, his keen senses alert. Lyanna was there, standing at her window, staring into the night. Their eyes met again, and for a moment the world seemed to hold still. Rhaegar's heart, buried deep beneath layers of curse and solitude, stirred in a way he could not understand. The next morning, the village was abuzz with whispers. People spoke of seeing the Alpha King, of his shadow passing through the trees. They marveled at Lyanna's courage. Some called it foolishness. Others felt awe. Yet no one could imagine what had truly passed between the Alpha and the Omega that night. Lyanna returned to her routine, tending the gardens and caring for the small flock of animals she had inherited from her parents. Yet her thoughts were never far from the forest, from the golden eyes that had looked into her soul. She sensed a presence in the woods, something ancient and powerful, and she felt a strange responsibility, a need to understand, to confront the darkness not with weapons, but with her own quiet strength. Days passed, and the encounters continued, though brief and cautious. Rhaegar appeared at the edge of the village under cover of twilight, watching her from a distance. Lyanna, too, would sometimes feel the pull and step outside, sensing the gaze that always followed her. Neither spoke at first. Words were unnecessary. Their connection grew in silence, in the recognition of a shared loneliness that neither could name. The villagers, unaware of the subtleties between them, whispered warnings.
"Stay away from the woods," they said.
The Alpha King's beast cannot be tamed. Yet Lyanna felt something different. She felt not a beast, but a man trapped within a curse, a soul weighed down by centuries of isolation. And though she knew the danger, a strange courage stirred within her. One evening, as a pale moon rose above the trees, Rhaegar approached the village more closely than ever. His wolf form glinted in the moonlight, and the forest seemed to bend around his power. Lyanna stepped into the clearing, her heart steady. For the first time she walked toward the beast, unafraid. Rhaegar stopped, sensing the boldness of her step. The air grew thick with tension, the forest holding its breath. His golden eyes met hers, and for a moment he saw not a target, not prey, but a reflection of something he had forgotten, the possibility of trust, of connection, of understanding. "You should not be here," he growled, low and dangerous, his voice vibrating through the clearing.
"I should not fear you," she replied, her voice soft but unwavering.
"I do not see a beast. I see a man." The words struck him like a blade. None had ever spoken to him this way. None had ever looked past the shadows that clung to him, into the man beneath the curse. His body tensed, the beast within stirring, yet unable to act. A silence stretched between them. The wind whispered through the trees. Rhaegar's wolf instincts called for her retreat, yet another voice, deep, buried, human, urged him to listen, to wait, to understand. Lyanna took a step closer, her hand trembling but steady. She could feel the power radiating from him, the centuries of pain and solitude. And yet, she did not falter. "I do not know what you are," she said quietly. "But I do know that fear is not the only way to respond." The Alpha King's beast growled softly, a sound caught between warning and confusion. And then, as if the world itself paused, he turned and vanished into the forest. His howl followed, not with anger, but with something different. Something that spoke of longing, of curiosity, of a pull he could not resist. Lyanna watched the shadows where he disappeared, a strange ache in her chest. She did not understand what had passed, only that something inside her had changed. The forest was alive with whispers, and she felt as if the night itself had acknowledged her courage. By dawn, the village returned to its quiet routine, yet the story of that night would linger. Villagers would speak of the girl who dared to stand against the Alpha King's beast, though none could know the truth of what had passed in the shadows. Lyanna, however, carried the memory in her heart, the golden eyes, the silent understanding, the strange awakening of something ancient and powerful. And far in the forest, The Alpha King moved with a restless energy. For the first time in centuries, the curse that bound him felt different. Something had shifted, something had awakened, and the beast that no one could tame was now aware of one human who might, not with weapons, nor threats, nor magic, but with courage, patience, and the quiet power of her heart, be different. The night held its breath once more, and somewhere, between the trees, Lyanna and Rhaegar's fates began to entwine, setting in motion a story of danger, longing, and transformation that the kingdom of Eldrath would never forget. The days after that strange night were quiet in Lyanna's village, but quiet was only an illusion. The forest hummed with life, but beneath the rustling leaves, an unseen tension lingered. Lyanna felt it. Every time she stepped outside, every time the wind stirred, she sensed eyes upon her, and every time she thought of the Alpha King, the man behind the beast. Rhaegar had not returned to the village in the day, but in the twilight hours, when the shadows grew long and the forest whispered with secrets, he appeared, always at a distance, always silent, his golden eyes piercing through the darkness. He would watch her as she tended her animals, or walked along the paths she had known since childhood. At first, she had felt fear, but soon she realized that fear had no place when her heart and mind were clear. The villagers noticed her strange calm. They whispered among themselves.
"The girl is mad," they said. "No one survives the Alpha King."
Why does she not hide?
Yet Lyanna ignored their words. She could feel something drawing her to the forest, something that called not just to her body, but to her very soul.
One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyanna found herself at the edge of the woods. The sky was a soft orange, fading into the deep blue of night. She paused and listened. The forest was alive with sounds. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, but one sound stood out. The low, measured breathing of a large creature, and behind it, a soft movement that spoke of careful patience.
Rhaegar
stepped from the shadows. His human form glimmered in the fading light, dark and imposing. His gaze met hers immediately, and she held it without flinching. The forest seemed to still around them, as if it, too, was watching.
"You come to the edge of the forest again,"
he said, his voice low but controlled. There was a caution in his tone, a warning beneath the command. "I do not hide from the forest," Lyanna replied simply, "and I do not hide from you." For a moment, Rhaegar did not speak. He studied her as one studies something rare, something unexpected. Centuries of solitude and curse had left him cautious, hardened, untrusting. And yet he found himself drawn to her, pulled by something he could not name. No one had ever looked at him like she did, not with fear, not with awe, but with understanding, even curiosity. "You are brave," he said finally, "or perhaps foolish." Lyanna smiled faintly, the hint of warmth touching her lips. "Perhaps both," she said. "But I have learned that bravery is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward, despite it." Few had ever spoken like that to him, even fewer with such calm certainty. His wolf instinct stirred, sensing a power he could not name, a strange, gentle force that was not tied to blood or magic, but something deeper, something human. The days that followed became a silent dance. Rhaegar would appear at twilight, always observing. Lyanna would feel the pull, stepping into the shadows to meet his gaze. They spoke little. Words were unnecessary when each glance, each movement carried meaning. Lyanna learned to read the subtle shifts in his stance, the tension in his shoulders, the way his golden eyes softened when he looked at her. Rhaegar learned that her presence calmed the beast within him, even if only slightly, and that he found himself longing for these fleeting moments. But the kingdom was not idle. Rumors of the Alpha King's interest in a wolfless girl began to spread. The Council of Elders grew uneasy. Rhaegar's authority was absolute, yet this strange attachment worried them. In rival packs, whispers spoke of weakness. of the Alpha being distracted. Danger moved quietly, like a shadow at the edge of a candle's light. One night, under the light of a crescent moon, Liana followed a path into the deeper forest. She felt a pull she could not resist. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of pine and hearth. From the shadows, Rhaegar emerged, stepping silently between the trees. His presence was immense, yet she did not step back.
"You should not be here," he said, though there was a trace of something different in his voice, a hint of concern rather than command. "And yet I am," Liana replied.
Her voice was steady, carrying confidence born not of arrogance, but of clarity. "I am not afraid of what you are. I am here to understand." Rhaegar's eyes glinted in the moonlight. Few words had ever reached him like this. Understanding. Compassion. These were foreign, almost dangerous in their power. He stepped closer, careful not to frighten her, careful not to unleash the beast that waited beneath his skin. The forest seemed to respond to their proximity. Leaves rustled, shadows danced, and a faint wind carried their shared tension through the trees. Rhaegar's wolf instinct stirred, tempted to act on ancient habits of dominance and destruction, but something in Liana held him back. He realized that the pull he felt was not just instinct, it was choice. The choice to control, or to trust. Over the following days, Liana discovered fragments of Rhaegar's true self. He was not merely a beast or a king. Beneath the weight of centuries, beneath the curse that bound him to his wolf form, there was loneliness, a longing for connection that few could ever imagine. She saw the moments when his golden eyes softened, when his rigid posture relaxed, and when he spoke quietly to the night rather than to the kingdom. One afternoon she found him at the edge of a hidden stream, tending to a wounded bird. The sight startled her. This was the Alpha King, feared by all. Yet he moved gently, tenderly. She stepped closer, and he did not move away.
"Why do you care for such a small thing?" she asked.
He looked at her, and for a moment the forest held its breath.
"Because it is alive,"
he said simply. Because even in a world of shadows and fear, life is worth preserving. Liana felt something stir within her, a recognition that even the strongest beings carried vulnerability, that even those who seemed untouchable needed understanding. She realized that the bond forming between them was not about dominance or fear, but about seeing one another fully, without judgment. Yet tension remained. The forest itself seemed to sense their growing connection. Wolves of the Alpha King's pack prowled at the edges, watching, sniffing, testing boundaries. And in the villages and distant lands, those who sought power began to notice the strange change in Rhaegar. The Alpha King, who once moved through shadows like a storm, now lingered, drawn inexplicably to a human girl who could not fight or flee in the usual ways. One night, during a particularly bright moon, Rhaegar appeared fully in his wolf form. He moved silently through the trees, a living shadow, muscles rippling, fur blending into darkness. Liana waited in the clearing, her heart steady, her gaze unwavering. The beast approached, circling her slowly, sniffing, studying. She did not flinch. "You are not afraid." The beast's voice rumbled through her mind, carried by the strange bond that had begun to form.
"I do not see you as a monster," Liana replied, speaking not only to the wolf but to the man within. "I see you as someone trapped, someone who deserves to be more than the curse allows." Rhaegar felt the pull of something stronger than his rage or fear.
The wolf hesitated, its golden eyes locking with hers. The forest fell silent. The wind stilled. Even the distant calls of nocturnal animals seemed to pause, as if the night itself awaited the outcome. Then, as though answering an unspoken question, the Alpha King stepped closer. He did not attack. He did not growl. He simply stood, immense and powerful, yet restrained, and Liana, breathing steadily, reached out her hand. The air between them shimmered, charged with tension, understanding, and a strange, almost magical recognition. The beast within Rhaegar rumbled softly, conflicted, torn between centuries of instinct and the unfamiliar pull of trust. He had faced warriors, kings, and even rival beasts, yet never had he felt such hesitation. Never had he felt the raw, undeniable force of empathy. And as he looked into Lyanna's unwavering eyes, he realized that something in him was beginning to shift. The night stretched on, the moon climbing higher, casting silver light across the clearing. Lyanna felt the strange energy pulse between them, a rhythm neither fully understood. It was not fear, not power, not dominance. It was connection, a silent acknowledgement that both were changed by the other. Finally, with a low rumble, Rhaegar's wolf form backed into the shadows of the trees. He did not disappear completely, but retreated enough to give space. Lyanna watched him, understanding that this was the beginning, not the end. Something ancient had awakened, something that could change them both, and perhaps the kingdom itself. The forest had grown darker with the passing days. Shadows stretched longer under the silver light of the moon, and the wind carried whispers that spoke of change, of something shifting deep within the northern lands. For Lyanna, each step into the woods felt like stepping closer to a destiny she could not yet understand. The pull she felt was no longer gentle. It was insistent, demanding, as if the forest itself wanted her to face what had remained hidden for centuries. Rhaegar had been appearing more often, sometimes in human form, sometimes as the great black wolf whose golden eyes glowed like molten fire. He would watch her from a distance, and she could sense his struggle. The beast within him was stronger than any fear, any will, any law. Yet every time he saw her, a flicker of restraint held him back. For the first time in his long life, Rhaegar realized that the wolf he had become was not the only part of him that mattered. One evening, the sky darkened suddenly, heavy clouds rolling across the horizon as a storm approached. Lyanna had been gathering herbs near the edge of the forest when she heard the soft crackle of branches under large paws. She turned slowly, and there he was, the Alpha King in wolf form, immense and shadowed by the dim light of the fading day. He paused, his golden eyes locking with hers. Lyanna did not flinch. Her heart beat steadily, and though fear fluttered in her chest, it was quiet, almost respectful, not overwhelming. She took a step closer.
"You should not be here," Rhaegar rumbled, his voice deep within her mind, carried through the bond that had begun to form. "You do not understand what you face." "I do not need to understand," she said calmly, "to see who you truly are."
He had faced enemies, spies, even traitors, yet none had ever met him with such steady courage. The pull of centuries of loneliness tugged at him, whispering that perhaps, just perhaps, this human could see beyond the beast, beyond the curse that bound him. Rhaegar's human form appeared suddenly, as if the storm itself had lifted a veil. He towered over her, his dark hair wet from the rain that had begun to fall in light droplets. The golden eyes softened slightly, but there was tension in his shoulders, a tightness in his jaw. The curse he carried, the one that had shaped his entire life, was not something that could be overcome easily. It was a shadow woven into his blood, a wolf spirit bound to him in a way that had cursed generations of his family. Lyanna sensed it, even before he spoke.
"You are not just a beast," she said. "You are more."
"And I think you are afraid of what that might mean." Rhaegar's eyes widened, and he took a step back, both surprised and unsettled. No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever looked at him and spoken to the man. Not the wolf, not the king, but the being trapped in between. "I have lived centuries alone," he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Cursed to this form, feared by all."
You should fear me. Everyone does."
"I do not," Lyanna replied simply. "I see you."
Not the curse, not the wolf, but the man beneath it. And I think
"I think you can change," For the first time in centuries, Rhaegar felt the pull of hope.
It was terrifying. He had grown used to despair, used to rage, used to the endless nights of loneliness and hunger. And yet here, in the calm and courage of this small, human girl, he felt something shift, something that had been missing for centuries. Over the next few days, Rhaegar appeared more frequently, sometimes at the edge of the village, sometimes deep within the forest. Lyanna followed the pull, allowing herself to enter spaces she had never dared to explore. They spoke little, yet each moment carried weight. Words were unnecessary when the tension and understanding between them spoke more than any voice could. But the curse that bound Rhaegar was powerful, ancient, and dangerous. One night, under a full moon, it surged with an intensity he had never felt before. His body twisted, and his limbs lengthened, fur sprouting across his skin as the wolf took over completely. His growls rolled through the forest, low and violent, shaking the branches around him. Lyanna, sensing the disturbance, ran toward him. She knew the risk, knew that standing before the Alpha King in his full wolf form was dangerous beyond imagination. Yet, she did not stop. She felt a strange connection, a bond that went deeper than fear, deeper than instinct. "Rhaegar!" she called, her voice carrying across the clearing.
Listen to me!
The wolf froze, turning its head slowly. Golden eyes glowed, locked onto hers. The air was heavy with power and tension. Lyanna stepped forward, raising her hand slowly, deliberately, showing no fear. "I do not fear you," she said.
I see you, the man inside you, the one who is more than this curse. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath.
The forest was silent, the storm paused, and even the distant cries of nocturnal animals faded. The wolf growled softly, almost confused, as though it recognized something in her words. Then, something impossible happened. Rhaegar's form began to falter, the transformation stuttering as if the beast itself hesitated. Lyanna's heart pounded. She had no magic, no wolf blood, no power like the Alpha King's pack. Yet somehow, the force of her calm, her understanding, was affecting him. It was as if her presence reminded the wolf that it did not have to dominate, did not have to destroy, did not have to follow the curse blindly. Rhaegar's eyes softened, the golden fire dimming slightly as he lowered his head. The growls subsided, replaced by a deep, low rumble that seemed almost like a question. Lyanna took another step forward, her hand reaching out toward him. "You are not alone," she whispered.
And you do not have to be what the curse makes you. You can choose something else. I believe you can."
The wolf hesitated. Then slowly, impossibly, Rhaegar shifted back into human form. He fell to his knees, drenched in rain, breathing heavily. Lyanna ran to him, kneeling beside him, her hand on his shoulder. But strength is not only in power. It is in trust, in courage, in choosing to face what scares you. Even the beast inside can be faced. Rhaegar looked at her, his golden eyes shining with something he had not felt in centuries. Vulnerability. You do not understand the danger you are in, he said. If the pack or the kingdom knew you came here, I do not care you.
"I do not care," Lyanna said firmly.
I came here because I could not ignore the pull. I cannot ignore what I feel, and I cannot turn away from you. Not now. For the first time, Rhaegar felt a real human connection. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The curse that had ruled his life, the wolf that had driven him for centuries, had never faced anything like this. A human, small, unarmed, and unafraid, had touched something deep within him that no weapon, no spell, no power had ever reached. Days turned into nights, and nights into longer, quieter watches in the forest. Rhaegar and Lyanna learned to move with each other, understanding gestures, glances, the unspoken language that formed between two beings connected by trust and courage. Each encounter was a test, a challenge, a silent dance of restraint and understanding. The forest itself seemed to recognize their bond, the trees whispering around them, the wind carrying faint echoes of approval.
Yet danger was never far. Rumors of the Alpha King's distraction reached rival packs.
Some saw it as weakness, a flaw to exploit. And while Rhaegar and Lyanna focused on understanding each other, threats began to move closer to the village, closer to the forest. Shadows of jealousy, suspicion, and ambition circled at the edges, waiting for the moment to strike. One evening, as the moon rose full and bright above the treetops, Lyanna and Rhaegar faced the forest together. He stood tall, human again, yet the tension in his muscles spoke of the wolf waiting within. "You cannot tame me fully," Rhaegar said quietly. "The curse, it is older than you, older than this kingdom. It may never end."
"Then I will not try to tame you," Lyanna said. "I will stand with you."
I will face it with you. That is enough.
Rhaegar's gaze softened, the golden eyes reflecting the silver moonlight. For the first time, he did not see her as weak or fragile. He saw courage, understanding, and a bond that no curse, no power, no century of loneliness could break entirely. And then, as the wind whispered through the trees, a distant howl echoed across the forest. It was not the Alpha King's, nor entirely human. It carried a message, a warning, and a promise.
All at once, Rhaegar stiffened, and Lyanna felt the energy pulse through her.
The forest was alive with tension. Moonlight spilled across the clearing, casting silver shadows over the damp earth. Rhaegar stood tall, every muscle tense, as the golden glow of his eyes scanned the edges of the trees. Lyanna stood beside him, calm and steady despite the quiet hum of danger in the night. Something approached them from the darkness, a presence that was neither fully human nor fully wolf, but powerful and dangerous all the same. Rhaegar's body trembled slightly. The beast within him stirred, sensing a challenge, a test of dominance. He had faced enemies, invaders, and rival packs countless times in his life, but tonight he faced something far more profound, the possibility of choice. Could he fight the curse that had ruled him for centuries? Could he trust the human who had dared to stand beside him? Lyanna reached out, her hand brushing against his arm. He flinched slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of centuries pressing down on him.
You are not alone, she whispered.
We face it together. The words, simple and clear, carried more power than any blade, more weight than any magic. Rhaegar's golden eyes softened, and for the first time, the beast within him paused. It was not tamed, not conquered, but it hesitated, and that hesitation was everything. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a rival alpha from the western lands. His wolf form was immense, black as night, eyes sharp and piercing. He had heard the rumors of the Alpha King's distraction, of the human girl who had dared to enter the northern forest, and he had come to test the king's strength.
Rhaegar, the rival growled, his voice low and threatening. The kingdom whispers of weakness. Step aside, or face the consequences.
Rhaegar straightened, his jaw tight, his golden eyes burning brighter than ever. But he did not step forward immediately. Instead, he looked at Lyanna. Her presence steadied him, reminded him of the man he had hidden beneath the wolf and the curse. She had faced him without fear, seen him as he truly was, and given him the courage to choose. Not rage, not instinct, but purpose. "I do not step aside," Rhaegar said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "And this is not a challenge I face alone." The rival alpha growled, and his wolf form lunged, but Rhaegar did not immediately strike back. Instead, he transformed fully into his wolf self, massive and shadowed, every movement controlled, deliberate, measured. Liana stepped forward slightly, her hand raised as if to calm the tension, and a faint warmth radiated from him. She did not understand fully what it was, only that her presence seemed to steady the storm within the Alpha King. The two wolves faced each other, and for a moment the forest held its breath. Rhaegar's beast growled low, a sound that resonated with centuries of pain and power. But something remarkable happened. The wolf did not attack recklessly. He moved with restraint, guided by the human within him, guided by the trust and courage of the girl who had dared to see him as more than a curse. Lyanna's heart pounded. She had never seen such power, such danger. And yet, she did not flinch. She could feel the connection, the bond that had grown between them, pulsing like a living thing. The Alpha King was not simply a beast to be feared. He was a man who had learned, through trust and courage, to face the curse within. The rival Alpha struck, teeth bared, claws ready. Rhaegar met the attack with precision, not violence, not destruction, but control. Each movement was calculated, each step a testament to the strength he had gained, not from domination, but from understanding. He moved with grace, countering the rival's attacks, showing power without cruelty. Lyanna watched, breath held. She could see the struggle in Rhaegar's golden eyes. The beast fought to rise, to dominate, but the man fought too, guided by her courage and his own growing resolve. And then, slowly, almost impossibly, the rival Alpha faltered. He sensed the difference in Rhaegar, the shift in his strength. This was no longer the Alpha King who had been feared for centuries. This was a man who had faced himself, who had allowed trust to become power, who had embraced his own heart as fully as his wolf. With a final growl, the rival backed away, sensing that this battle was lost. He disappeared into the forest, leaving Rhaegar and Lyanna in the quiet of the moonlight. The storm that had threatened the night began to lift, leaving a calm, almost sacred silence. Rhaegar's wolf form shimmered, and slowly he returned to human shape. Rain soaked his dark hair and clothing, but his eyes, golden and intense, held a light they had never held before. He looked at Lyanna, and for the first time, he allowed himself to smile.
You stood with me, he said quietly, when the beast wanted to control me, when centuries of curse pushed me toward rage. You stood by me.
How is that possible?
Lyanna smiled softly. Because I see you, she said.
Not the curse, not the wolf, not the Alpha King. I see you, and I believe you can choose something different. I believe you can be free. Rhaegar's chest tightened. Freedom. Freedom. He had never known it. He had never dared to imagine it. And yet, here it was, offered not by magic, not by force, but by courage, by trust, by a human heart that had looked beyond fear. The Alpha King was no longer the unapproachable, untamed beast that the people had feared. His golden eyes still burned with power, but there was now a softness, a humanity that had been hidden for centuries. Lyanna walked beside him through the village, and the people watched, whispered, and wondered. No one had dared approach the Alpha King like this before.
And yet, there was no threat in their presence, only strength, trust, and quiet courage.
Rhaegar began to embrace what he had learned. He trained less with anger and more with focus. He observed the kingdom with new eyes, considering not only power and dominance, but protection and understanding. And always, Lyanna was there, not as a tool, not as a pawn, but as a guide, a companion, and a mirror that reflected the man beneath the beast. One evening, as the sun set over the northern mountains, Rhaegar led Lyanna to the cliff overlooking the kingdom. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scents of pine, earth, and the river below. For a long time they stood in silence, watching the land they both cared for.
I never thought I could feel like this, Rhaegar said finally. I never believed that trust or love or courage could matter to me.
But you have changed that.
You have changed me. Liana placed her hand over his. We change each other, she said softly. And the world changes when we face it together. The golden eyes of the Alpha King softened completely. He had faced centuries of loneliness, of curse, of rage and power, and now, for the first time, he felt whole. Not because the wolf was gone, not because the kingdom was tamed, but because he had embraced trust, courage, and the human heart that had dared to believe in him. The forest around them seemed to breathe, as if acknowledging the change. Wolves from the distant pack howled softly, not in challenge, but in recognition. The mountains, the rivers, the trees. They seemed to witness the moment when the untamable Alpha King had chosen a new path. Yet even in this moment of triumph, a whisper of caution remained. The kingdom was vast, the rivals many, and the curse, though weakened, was never entirely gone. But for now, Rhaegar and Lyanna stood together, strong, unafraid, bound not by fear, but by trust, courage, and an understanding that transcended centuries. Lyanna looked at him, her eyes steady, her heart full. The world may test us, she said, but we face it together.
And that is enough. Rhaegar smiled, a rare and genuine smile.
Together, he agreed. And with that word, the bond between the Alpha King and the Wolfless Omega became unbreakable, a union of strength, courage, and heart. The night held its breath once more, and though the forest whispered of past curses and future challenges, Lyanna and Rhaegar knew that they had faced the greatest test already. They had faced themselves, and in doing so, they had chosen each other. As dawn broke, silver light spilled over the mountains and forests of Eldrath. Rhaegar and Lyanna stood on the cliff hand in hand, watching the kingdom awaken. In the distance, the sound of a wolf's howl echoed, not in anger, not in warning, but in celebration, in recognition of a story centuries in the making. And somewhere, in the shadows at the edge of the forest, eyes watched, curious, cautious, but respectful. The Alpha King had faced the curse, embraced his heart, and found redemption. And the human who had dared to see the man beneath the beast had changed a kingdom forever. The story of fear, power, and curses had ended, not with domination, not with destruction, but with trust, courage, and transformation. And for the first time, the Alpha King could see a future where he was not alone, where the beast and the man could coexist, and where love and courage could triumph over centuries of darkness.